about the ball tampering. So, as a lot of people know, in Australian cricket back in March this year in South Africa, we had some ball tampering where our new opening batsman, Cameron Bancroft, was caught tampering with the ball with sandpaper. And there were a lot of other things to do with that. So I wanted to talk about that, about my opinion about that, and I'll just say from the outset that I disagree with the majority view of it, and I'm going to say why I think that David Warner and Steve Smith should not be banned now. And I personally believe that David Warner had nothing to do with it and should not have been punished at all. So I think Steve Smith had a very minor role and should have faced the one test ban that ICC said. In saying that, I fully support the penalty that Cameron Bancroft received. I think it should have been heavier. So first off, I just wanted to get this across that a lot of people, and this is not just for cricket, this is with anything, they just read the headlines and don't read the actual information that's being assessed, that's being shown to everybody. So everything I'm going to say here is public. It's not me with inside information or imagining things or anything like that. All this stuff is out there. So I'm not strange with this. I'm not. Well, you might think I'm strange, but whatever. Yeah. So first off, when it first started, now a lot of people may not realise this. David Warner was being teased about his wife Candace Warner, who was claimed to have had an affair. Now, I don't really want to go too much into it, but suffice to say that people were wearing masks with Candace's ex-boyfriend's, face on them, and that it was a very high level of teasing. It's beyond a joke. It was beyond the level that was acceptable behaviour. And some of the South African players were joining in. It was mostly the crowd, but there were some of the players that were. Now, one of them was Kagiso Rabada, and I hope I said his name right. So he was banned for one test in relation to that. I'm going to call it teasing. And I think that ban was appropriate. One test, I'm not saying he's a criminal, but one test. And I think it would have set the right message that there is a line to cross. We have sledging. Sledging is fun little jokes. There's been books written, and they're very funny joke books about sledging. Well, Kagiso Rabada did, and some others as well. He wasn't the only one, but it was beyond that line. It was past that line. Now, I'm not saying that he's the only person ever to cross that line. He's certainly not. But it was a level where he needed to be banned, and it was important that he was banned. Now, the appeal, it was heard, and as I understand it, it was overturned based on eventually because everybody else was doing it, which I don't agree with, but that's what they've done. So that was the emotional situation that we've got to understand. We're in there. That was the emotional situation we were in, where South Africa were doing things that they shouldn't have been doing, and Australia were copying the brunt of it. As a touring team, we weren't welcomed, and David Warner in particular was targeted. And it was unfair, it was unwarranted, and it was unjustified. And that was the situation we're in. Now, we get to the day of, we've got the third test going on. Kagiso Rabada's back in there. Yay! Yay if you're a South African fan. Boo if you're an Australian fan. And I don't know how the rest of the world thinks. I think most of the world would have been on the boo side. They would have been thinking he should have stayed banned. And anyway, so we're in there. First day, what's the front page in all the South African newspapers is Australians are cheating. And it was having Pat Cummins putting his boot on the ball. And it was Mitchell Starc throwing the ball into the pitch. Front page, South African newspapers, all over the internet, all over the TV. And it was, I mean, I don't want to swear, but it was not true. I mean, yes, they were doing it, but it wasn't ball tampering, if that if that makes sense. We're saying that's ball tampering. Oh, ball tampering. Look at that. We've got the foot on. There were legitimate reasons for why they were doing those things, and it was within the rules of the game. Now, a ball might end up on the pitch by accident every so often, and it happens. And that's not always ball tampering. A lot of people get a bit mixed up. They get very passionate and nationalistic about these things. And all South Africans were saying Australia were ball tampering because of Pat Cummins and Mitchell Starc. Now, the umpires saw the footage, made no reports about either of them. So we can say quite conclusively that neither of them actually engaged in any ball tampering. All right? Certainly not on the footage or on any evidence that was ever presented. Neither of them have been charged. Neither of them have been found guilty of anything. Okay? But that was the situation on day one. Now, why did that happen? As we found out later, at the end of the match, South Africa were in fact warned for ball tampering in that test. Otis Gibson was on camera saying that they were in trouble for deliberately throwing the ball into the pitch. And again, it's not sandpaper on the ball. It's not the same thing as what Cameron Bancroft did, but it was still ball tampering. So South Africa were ball tampering in that test. It's not controversial. They were. Okay, they weren't doing it with sandpaper. No, they were throwing the ball into the pitch. It's a fairly low level. You're facing a one-test ban for that if they were at a level that would be considered to be against the rules. Now, they were only warned. They weren't banned. They were supposed to be facing a review after the match, and that review never happened because of what I assume because of what happened with Bancroft. Maybe it wasn't bad enough to warrant being banned, but they were still. Well, let's just say they were doing worse than what Cummins and Starc were doing. So if we like, and here's a simple way to look at it, what Starc and Cummins were doing was a low level. What the South Africans were doing was a higher level. Now, what Bancroft obviously did was a higher level again. And so I'm just putting that into context so that we can understand where this whole thing came from. I'm not in any way justifying what Bancroft did. I think it was a disgraceful act. And again, I think he should have been banned for a year. I think under the ICC rules, he should have faced a 5-test ban for tampering with the ball and an extra 2 tests for lying about it. And I think it's very serious what he did. And I don't think it justifies it that South Africa were throwing the ball into the pitch, which they were doing. They were doing that. All right. And even if South Africa had done something very bad, much worse, even if they put sandpaper on the ball, it still wouldn't justify what Bancroft did. Okay? But I'm just pointing that out there so that we know and we remember, we put it into proper context, that is what the situation was. This wasn't Australia being cheaters for no reason. This was Australia up against a team who were doing a number of things that they shouldn't have been doing. And we need to put that context in there. Had they been up against a team that wasn't doing anything wrong, that wasn't teasing one of our players and getting away with it, and wasn't throwing the ball into the pitch, getting away with that whilst accusing us of things that we weren't doing. So that was South Africa were. Certainly in my opinion, I think that what South Africa were doing was cheating, and that was in that Test match. I'm saying, and in the Test match before that, and in the series as a whole. I think that their behaviour was inappropriate, and it's not how cricket should be played. And again, I'm not justifying what Bancroft did, but I'm putting the context in there. Now, as we know, and there's certain facts that we know about this situation. So first of all, I'm just going to go over the facts. So fact number 1 is that Cameron Bancroft used sandpaper on the ball. There's no doubt about that. Nobody's disputing that. I'm not disputing that. Nobody is. So he used sandpaper on the ball, small little square, and hit it in his hand. So that's not in dispute. Nobody's disputing that. I've never heard anybody claim that it was anything different. There was a time when he lied about it, and there were some people that believed his lies. But there's no doubt at this stage that he used sandpaper on the ball. Okay, Second point is that he lied about it. So when the umpires approached him, he pulled out some sunglasses case that was black felt, I believe. I hope I've got that right. Black felt sunglasses case that he produced to the umpires. So, I'm saying five test ban for the ball tampering, 2 tests for lying. That was one part of the lie. We also know that in the press conference, Steve Smith, on Cameron Bancroft's behalf, said that it was sticky tape. Now, had it been sticky tape, that still would have been ball tampering, got to say that. But, I mean, he lied about it. And now, there's a question. Did Steve Smith lie because of his own guilt or because Cameron Bancroft told him that it was sticky tape? Now, we can and ah about that, but look, I'll get back to that later because that's speculation. It's fairly close to proven, but it's speculation. So those things are proven. So there's no doubt about that. And also, so next bit, we know that Steve Smith in the press conference said that they had a discussion about it during the lunch break, and that the leadership group had talked about South Africa cheating and ways to deal with that. It was a discussion that Cameron Bancroft was not involved with, but he overheard. So there was certainly discussion. I've never heard anybody dispute that. Who the leadership group is, we've kind of and ah about it, but we believe that it was Mitchell Starc, Josh Hazlewood, Steve Smith, David Warner, and Nathan Lyon. So all the bowlers except for Pat Cummins, and it also included Steve Smith and David Warner. So that's what we believe. Those 5 players were the ones having a chat. What they said, we've had a few different versions of it. It seems that it was certainly talking about Kagiso Rabada's ban and how the ban had been relieved. It was also about South Africa getting reverse swing too quickly and relating to how Mitchell Starc and Pat Cummins have been in South Africa's newspapers accused of tampering with the ball, and that nobody had commented on South Africa actually throwing the ball into the pitch. So they were the discussions that they had. There was no plot to tamper with the ball. Certainly, sorry, I should say that in that discussion with those 5 people, there was no plot to tamper with the ball. It was understood by Cameron Bancroft to be, perhaps, but it was not. Anyway, there's been no proof. There's been no admission. There's been no evidence to suggest that it was a plot. Okay, so I just got to say that. I know I said I was just going to stick to raw facts, but that one's really hard to interpret in any other way. So basically, we've got, and I can just guess what kind of words they might have said. Hey, how come Rabada's still out there? He should be banned. He's now tampering with the ball, throwing it into the pitch. How come we're getting run over for it when we're not even doing that? That kind of thing, roughly speaking, is what they were talking about. Now, diplomatically, they're not mentioning Rabada's name because, there's certain things they're not allowed to say publicly. But Rabada was one of South Africa's fast bowlers who was reported by the umpire for throwing the ball into the pitch. Now, there were others. I believe the other one was Ferdinand Philander. It doesn't really matter who it is, really. But suffice to say that they were reported as a group. Anyway, so that's known. Okay. Next thing we know for sure is that Darren Lehman, on his little walkie-talkie, as soon as the vision came, walkie-talkie, other side, Peter Handscomb, the 12th man. Peter Handscomb walks over. Straight after that, Cameron Bancroft throws it in his pants, the sandpaper, I mean. Now, there's no dispute about that. There shouldn't be. There definitely shouldn't be any dispute about that. But Darren Lehman, in his position as coach, told Peter Handscomb something along the lines of, hey, you've been caught, hide it. Now, there is a little bit of dispute about that because we didn't hear the audio of what was said. And Darren Lehman has since said that all he said was, "What the F? What are you doing?" And that Bancroft somehow interpreted that. Now, I think it's more likely that he told him to put it down his pants, but who knows? Certainly, if Bancroft is interpreting people complaining about South Africa possibly cheating as saying he should cheat, then it is possible that he could interpret, "Hey, stop that," to "Let's put it down the pants." Now, it depends on how you view Bancroft as a person. If you think he's the kind of person that is going to misinterpret things and lie to people and lie about people, or if you think that he's a reasonably honest person. I mean, there's two ways to think about this, really. So basically, I mean, if you think of it, and this is how I think about that. When I used to play football in high school, there'd often be situations where we had a good player on the other team, and we'd be encouraged to knock them out or eliminate them in some way that would be dirty, absolutely dirty. You would get banned for it. You'd get suspended. You'd get red carded. You'd be kicked off the team. All that sort of stuff. You'd do that for your team. Now, the likelihood, it seems, is that Cameron Bancroft took it upon himself to do something to level the playing field, or what he believed was leveling the playing field, and he knew that he was going to get banned as a result, so that he did that for the Australian team. Now, I don't think there's any suggestion that Bancroft did it because he's a jerk. He was doing it for Australia. The question is whether Australia wanted him to do it. If he's grown up as I grew up, when we had a good player on the other team, and we were not a good player, the people that would knock out somebody else on the other team were the worst players. So if I was a fringe player, I was on the bench, I was reserve, I was the one that was expected to knock out that other player. And I think Bancroft has sort of taken that sort of attitude that is very common in sports around the world. And it's in every sport, it's in every country in the world. And again, I'm saying that I think what Bancroft did was wrong. I'm not in any way suggesting that what he did was okay, but I'm saying it seems to make sense, and it seems fairly likely that he did this believing that he was helping the Australian team. And indeed, let's be honest here. If this had been treated as every other ball tampering case has been before and since, he would have got a one test match ban. In fact, he only got a fine. He didn't even get a ban. He would have got a one test ban. Nothing's happened from it, and he'd probably be regarded as a hero. I mean, if you look at Faf du Plessis, the South African captain, I apologise for saying his name wrong, but he tampered with the ball twice before he was made captain. Now, most likely, it's probably in a similar situation where he decided to help out his team, to level the playing field, to do it because the other team's doing it. And the reward for that is that he was made captain. Now, okay, he's a good player. This might not be directly related, but the team would be appreciating his sacrifice. As a lot of teams appreciate sacrifice of different kind. We all talk about, oh, wow, this person, he got injured, he was playing with a broken arm and broken leg and all this sort of stuff. There's also the sacrifice of being banned for professional foul. We see that sort of thing in basketball. We see it in every sport. And this is what Bancroft did. This is, I think, realistically, this is what people who tamper with the ball are doing. They're taking a professional foul, which is currently not being penalised as much as it should be. And it shouldn't be. I mean, we shouldn't have seen Smith and Water banned, but it certainly shouldn't be a fine when using sandpaper. That's ridiculous. Now, we also talked about the idea that David Warner set the whole thing up. Now, I can't remember who suggested this first, but one of the cricket expert journalist people said it like this, or something like this. I apologise, I was stealing content from someone else. But basically, the idea that a batsman and another batsman told a third batsman to tamper with the ball to help out bowlers who are somehow magically not involved is ridiculous. Okay? That's just, if you've got a bowler telling a batsman to do it, I mean, if the situation had been where, let's say, Mitchell Starc or Pat Cummins or Josh Hazlewood had said, "Hey Bancroft, can you put some sandpaper on the ball for us and rough it up for us?" That's believable. Okay, that's believable. If instead we've got the captain saying, "Hey, can you help out our fast bowlers and rub sandpaper on the ball?" It's believable. Okay, so if Smith had said that to Bancroft, that's believable. The idea that the vice captain has got no real power. That's David Warner went up to Bancroft and said to him, "Tamper with the ball." That's not believable. What power does Warner have? Warner was a vice captain, which is a token position, really. If you're vice captain, you don't typically become captain. Once they decide to make a captain, it's someone else. All vice captain is sort of like saying, "We like you," saying, "Hey, don't quit. You know, we like you. One day we might consider you for a captain." I mean, Ian Healy was vice captain for 8 years or something, and he was never made captain. Same for Adam Gilchrist. I know he was captain like 1 or 2 tests, but he was never the proper captain. Shane Warne was vice captain for ages, and that's the position of vice captain. It means nothing really. It's a token position. So Warner had no real power. And to suggest that he had the power to do that without Smith's backing is ridiculous. To suggest that Smith had the power to do that without the backing of the fast bowlers is ridiculous. Okay, so people who are believing this claim are not thinking through. I just think you can't come to that conclusion if you're thinking it through seriously. The idea that Warner did it and Smith didn't, and that no but fast bowlers were involved, is ridiculous. Okay, so now before I get into my belief of what happened there, so I wanted to talk about how ball tampering works. So when you have somebody decide to tamper with a ball, and I think the first person to be caught was Michael Atherton from England in 1992, I believe. So when you decide to do that, the whole team knows, okay? Because Michael Atherton is not the one bowling the ball. The one bowling the ball is going to know. And so however many bowlers you've got, they're all going to know pretty quickly. The wicketkeeper's going to know. And then when they pass it around the field, everybody's going to know. So within about, say, 2 or 3 overs, maybe 10 minutes, every person on the team is going to know. And the opposition won't know. And the umpires won't know. But every player on your team is going to know. So every case that we've had of ball tampering, and this has happened now in 7 countries, including Australia. Australia was the 6th. Sri Lanka has since done it, so that's 7. All 7 countries, every time that they were ball tampering, the whole team knew. And we can say that with confidence. And there's not really any way to dispute that. So when this happened with Australia, the whole of the Australian team knew. And we can also suggest that, I mean, this is one thing that's been speculated, is that you can't get reverse swing without tampering with the ball. Now, reverse swing started in the 1970s, late 1970s in Pakistan. I hope I'm saying it right. So if people are believing that every reverse swing is from ball tampering, we've had ball tampering for 40 years. And we've had at least 7 teams that have done it on a regular basis. Now, the 3 that haven't are West Indies, Bangladesh, and Zimbabwe. So if we are to blame Australia for this one incident, we must blame all those 7 teams above them. We do not blame West Indies, Bangladesh, or Zimbabwe. They happen to be the 3 lowest ranked teams. If we were to take the same sort of penalties that Australian cricket have taken, and if every country had taken those sort of penalties against their own players, we would be having Bangladesh, West Indies, and Zimbabwe as the 3 top teams in world cricket. Now, if you're from Bangladesh, West Indies, or Zimbabwe, you'd be very happy with that idea. Incidentally, West Indies were the best team in world cricket before reverse swing started happening. And they continue to be until mid-80s, late 80s, and some people will say even into the 90s. So West Indies could still be the number 1 team, potentially, if we take the view that ball tampering has existed in those other 7 countries and has existed since the 1970s. Now, well, late 1970s. I don't know if that's true. How do I know? But we know that just because you're caught this one time doesn't mean that that's the first time you've done it. Australia have been getting reverse swing for at least 5 or 6 years. And so if we can suggest that all reverse swing is because of ball tampering, Australia have been ball tampering for 5 or 6 years. We can then say England have been doing it for 28 years. We can say Pakistan have been doing it for 40 years. And, I'm not going to keep going with all this, but you're looking at a serious issue. Now, I've heard of people saying, and I've heard this, I've heard a similar sort of thing with the Olympics, with the drug taking and all that, is that if everybody's ball tampering, you should just let everybody do it. Not really. Because you see, the thing is, if you allow ball tampering not without control, what you're going to get is start of the match, team gets given the ball, they tamper with it however they want to, and then they come out, that's reverse swinging from ball one. Or if they don't want a ball reverse swing, then it won't be, because they don't always want reverse swing. So that could be a situation, and perhaps that's what we should do. I don't know. But I think realistically, what we should do is take a really hard stance on this. And we should be putting in a 1-year ban on anyone caught. I mean, we know we're not going to catch everybody. If you were banned for a year, if Bancroft knew that he was going to be banned for a year, and I mean, I'm assuming this was a professional foul, effectively, he wouldn't have done it. Not for a 1-year ban. And if you're talking 5 tests plus 2 more for lying about it, you wouldn't do it for that. And if it was treated in the same way as chucking or match fixing or spot fixing, admittedly they're sort of different, but they're probably in a lot of ways as bad. But if it was treated that way badly, then yeah, I think that professional fouls like that wouldn't happen. And I think that we've seen that all around the world. So 7 teams now. So, yep, 7 teams have been proven to have done it. There's a possibility that the other 3, and of course we've got 2 new ones now in Afghanistan and Ireland, but there's a possibility that those other 3 have done it. They've just not been caught. Anyway, so that's on that part. Now, I wanted to skip across now and just say what I believe happened in this case. And so we've got why is David Warner the one that's been blamed for the whole thing? Now, David Warner, as I said right at the start, was being teased because of his wife potentially, well, accused of cheating on him. I shouldn't say that she was, because she obviously wasn't. And that started this whole thing. Now, David Warner reacting in that way is not always something that everybody agrees with. That since the start of his career, he's said a lot of stupid things. And if he's reading this, watching this, listening to this, he'll admit that he has said a lot of stupid things. David Warner has, he tried to punch Joe Root once. And, the sorts of things that he says are not diplomatically appropriate. They're not appropriate for the captain of a Test cricket team, and he shouldn't really be vice captain. I agree with him removing him from vice captain as a response to this. I don't think he ever should have been, to be honest. And look, I agree with Steve Smith losing captaincy over this as well. I think that his decision to admit, if you like, to something that hadn't happened, just wrong. I mean, if you're going to admit to something, you admit to something. You don't admit to half of it and then lie about it. If you're not going to admit to something, then say no comment. I mean, the Sri Lankans, when they were caught, they said no comment. They denied everything. Faf, when he was caught, denied everything, even sued him. I mean, we could have denied it. We had the visual there, or we could have admitted to it. What was probably the right approach would have been to have said no comment. So Steve Smith, have it to do again. I'm sure he'd agree with me. He should have said no comment. He should have said no comment, not going to go back to that. And then they could work out what they're going to say. And if that is Cameron Bancroft coming out there and admitting to using sandpaper and saying why he used it, that could have been a good response. To date, Bancroft has not admitted to using sandpaper or to doing anything. He was proven to have done it, but he hasn't admitted to it. Smith and Warner have not admitted to anything at all. They've said in their interviews, they said, we admit to bringing the game into disrepute. We're sorry for our actions. They haven't said what those actions were. So there's no admission there. It might be a fine point for a lot of people. I think it's a very important point. If they admitted to it, they'd be saying, well, we did this. And I don't think they did do it. So I was going to say, as for David Warner, so why is he blamed? So he's loudmouth. He's not liked by everybody in the Australian cricket team. He's probably similar to Shane Warne in that respect. People that like him, people that don't like him. Some people like that he's honest, and he's always been very honest, just ridiculously honest. I should be nodding there. But he's also been very loudmouth and inappropriate. And so I think that there's certain people that want certain things kept secret, and Warner doesn't always keep them secret. He also takes reactions about things that are not always correct. So, for example, if we take the Joe Root situation, he went to punch him for putting a fake beard on. I don't know if anyone remembers this. And this was because he believed he was racially abusing Hashim Amla, who wasn't there. And he wasn't making fun of Hashim Amla because Hashim Amla, he wasn't there. And Joe Root was just making fun of the fact he couldn't grow a beard. So that's the thing, is that a lot of the things that David Warner says, whilst they're truthful for him, are not always accurate. And a lot of people would just want him to just say, just shut up, just stop saying things. So we know that David Warner in the dressing room said something along the lines of, don't pretend that you didn't know what was going on. Now, a lot of people have taken that to infer that the entire team would have obviously known about Cameron Bancroft's ball tampering. And it could well have meant that. Mitchell Starc, we know, stood up and demanded for Warner to be banned for life as a response to that. So I don't believe that it was him talking about everybody touching the ball, nor do I think it was an admission to organising the whole thing. I think that's a rather strange conclusion to make. So I think most likely what Warner was talking about was that he was suggesting that Starc and Cummins, who was shown in South African newspapers and on TV, Starc throwing the ball into the ground and Cummins putting his foot over it. And Warner wanted those two to go on to have a press conference and admit to doing that. And to say, well, that's not ball tampering, but, South Africa did that, we did that. And just to clear the air. Now, I think that Warner had a point. I'm assuming that he said that because I think that's the logical thing that he said. Why would he say this other thing that people have claimed? Even for Warner, he wouldn't. But for Warner to say that, I mean, you just imagine that you're Starc or Cummins and you've just been raked over the coals completely unfairly by the South African media. And now we've got a ball tampering thing which is threatening to end careers. And they're going to be annoyed. I would use another word, but they're going to be really seriously annoyed. And they're going to say, hey, we've suffered enough. Why do we have to admit to some minor thing that's not even illegal when the other team have not only got away with the things that are illegal, I mean, illegal in cricket terms, but also they've accused us and we're going to go down for this ball tampering. So I think that Starc wanted it to be kept quiet, and I think he had a good reason for doing that, and I think Cummins wanted that to be kept quiet. I haven't heard anything about Cummins saying anything at all, so I know Starc has. So I think he wanted it to be kept quiet because he didn't want to have it with Bancroft, Starc and Cummins banned, and that had they been honest about it and said that, then it could have been those three facing 1 year bans. And that would have been unfair. And I think that's why Starc decided to lash out at Warner and why Warner ended up the one being banned and not Starc and Cummins. Is that the right response? I think that having these heavy bans made a lot of people in Australia really happy. that we were taking responsibility for it, and I think that's a good thing. I think that look, you're going to say a few things that aren't completely true in any situation. It's damage control, and I don't think they ever should have publicly stated that it was Warner's fault or that he organised it. I don't think that should have ever been said. The other thing is that I think that at a certain point they should have cleared the air and said, "Hey, this is what really happened." Now they said that as far as the sandpaper was concerned. They haven't been completely honest about what Lehman and Hanscom said. They haven't put in any way. They haven't put it together with Cummins and Stark. I'm not going to say ball tampering, but ball tampering like behaviour, we'll say, for very minor, perfectly legal. I have to reiterate that. And they haven't put in light of what South Africa were doing, what Kagiso Rabada was doing, the ban. And people have been showing this in a selective way. That they've pushed a certain view, and it's been overall quite a false view. And I think that when we look at it really and we get to the guts of it, Bancroft was doing it as a professional foul to help his team. Now, a lot of people would say that's a good thing. Again, I'm doing a little bit of assumption there, but I think it's reasonably obvious that it's the same kind of thing as in football terms. We used to do it in the 1980s. We had Hawthorn players like Dermot Brereton used to knock out somebody from the other team. He'd get a 1 or 2 game suspension for it, and it'd help his team. And that was considered good. And nowadays, in 2018, it's not considered good. But not everyone agrees with what's the norm in 2018. So I think we'll say Cameron Bancroft did it for, he was going to go down for it. He was taking on the beast, taking on South Africa, going to take his fall, good bloke, right? So he cheated, but he did it to help the team. Again, I don't agree with it, but he's not a bad guy for doing that. He did it to help the team, right? Steve Smith, he said the wrong things in that press conference. My goodness, he did. And he should have just said no comment. But I think that his motive was to try to help Bancroft and help the team. So good job. David Warner, he just wanted everyone to be honest. And I mean, maybe he should have thought twice before taking on Mitchell Stark. But seriously, I think Stark's more guilty than Warner. I don't think we should be blaming Warner at all. Warner, sorry, said the wrong name. But I don't think we should be blaming David Warner at all. I think realistically, when we look at it, rather than him being the number one cause of the whole thing, we should be thinking he's the one that had nothing to do with it. Now, I'm not saying that we should be banning Stark or Cummins or Lehman or Hanscom, but what I'm saying is that those 4 people are more responsible than Warner. And if we're looking at who to penalise, they should be penalised first. And I mean, I'll be thinking 1 test bans at most for those 4. Lehman should have been sacked as coach for the way he handled it. He was poor. Hanscom should have been left out of the UAE team because of that, and he was. And Cummins and Stark should have faced some minor censure, such as not participating in, I think they missed the IPL or something. Look, they might have been secret penalties that they were given, and I think good chance that they were. And then we've got the whole administration. What did the administration do wrong, really? What's the Longstaff review saying, really? They're saying that rather than tell the truth, I mean, the truth would have been really easy to say. Just say, hey, we had this chat, and this is what Steve Smith was trying to say. We had this chat. Bancroft heard it, misunderstood it, took it upon himself to put sandpaper on the book. What's wrong with that? Well, tell me what's wrong with that. What's wrong with saying that? We're all worried about, Bancroft got thrown under the bus. He didn't get thrown under the bus. Bancroft threw himself under the bus. He decided, and he did this nobly. We've got to say, he wasn't doing it to be a chicken. He was there going, hey, I'm going to take this ban. The thing that Bancroft did that was the worst was the sunglasses case thing and the sticky tape thing. Those two lies were worse than his ball tampering. If he'd gone there and said to the umpires, yeah, sorry, you got me. Well, would have got what, a 2 or 3 test ban? I don't know. But we wouldn't have had this whole furor, would we? We would have said, oh, well, he's a bad egg. Let's get rid of him for a while. He'd make it up somehow and we'd go back to our lives. The problem was, and it really started with his lying. And this is really big lying. I mean, you look at the other ball tampering cases, yes, well, they denied it and all that sort of stuff, but they didn't throw things under their pants, produce a sunglasses case, and then say it was sticky tape. And they didn't bring their whole team in down with him. I mean, every other case of ball tampering has had one person banned. This case, 3. Every other case, there's no doubt that every other case we had other people that knew about it at least. And most likely, at least in some of them, they were told to do it, or taught to do it, or shown to do it. But only one person was ever banned. So this is not fair. So I think that realistically, well, certainly they should have their bans lifted. And it's too late now. I'm saying this too late. But I've been saying this since it happened, really. But realistically, it was an appalling decision to not lift their bans. But I think most importantly, they're going along with what the public expectation is, and the public are being lied to, or at least being given selective information. All of this thing that I've said is available publicly. It's all been in the newspapers. So you could have all figured this out. But selective hearing, selective reporting, it's pushing a particular angle that we're supposed to believe that David Warner's evil. I mean, even if we accept their version, it still doesn't justify any penalty at all. I mean, maybe you lose a vice captaincy. You shouldn't be facing a year out of the game with no internationals and no domestics in Australia. And that's a very weird thing that says no domestics. What's that have to do with anything? But then you've got no domestics in Australia, but you're allowed to play every other country in the world. I mean, you think soon after the bans happened, the IPL for 2018 this year started. Warner and Smith were meant to be captains of their respective IPL franchises, and I think they were meant to get about $3 million each for that. IPL banned them under the mistaken belief that they weren't allowed to play. That's not true. They're playing this year. The bans are still in effect. They're going to play in 2019. So that, I think, highlights the misunderstanding, the misinterpretation, and there's been a lot of lying about this. I mean, the biggest lie is that Warner organised the whole thing. That's just complete nonsense. Well, and I mean, the other thing is that suggesting that this was somehow worse than other examples of ball tampering is silly. I mean, if you're going to go out there with sandpaper, that's very obvious. The only other one that I can think of that was as obvious as that is when Shahidi Afridi bit the ball. People said that wasn't really ball tampering because it was so obvious. Surely sandpaper is just as obvious. So, you know, if you're putting a bit of a lolly on the ball, you got it on your zipper, you know, all that sort of stuff is worse because it's sneaky, cheeky, you know. It's like if you went to the Olympics and just took a big, I don't know how they get steroids, but just inject a whole big bottle full, left it everywhere, and, you know, you did it mid-race, you know, you probably still get banned, but it's a bit obvious. You know, whilst the ones that they hide it in their blood, they take a little bit here, they have all these lies about it. I mean, the Lance Armstrong one, we didn't even know about it for like, what was it, 9 years or something. That's worse than somebody just got mid-race. So there's absolutely no way to justify these bans. There is for Bancroft, sorry. And there was, I mean, I think that Smith should have lost his captaincy for the way he handled the press conference. I think it was really bad. I think he let his team down by saying the leadership group without talking to the leadership group. And I think David Warner, the way he handled it, and I don't know exactly the words he said, but it sounds as if it was not good for the team, what he said. And so he should have lost vice captaincy. And look, leaving Warner out of the last test of the South African test series was probably reasonable as a suspension rather than a ban. Now, they're gonna see out their bans. Australia's gonna, who knows how they're gonna go against India. They're gonna go worse than they would have. They won the T20 tonight, which was shocking. I still think that Australia should win the test series. I'm thinking that India's best chance is in Adelaide, and they've also got a good chance in Sydney. I don't see India coming close in the other two venues, in Perth or Melbourne. It depends on how rain happens, who wins tosses, and all sorts of things. India have a small chance of winning the Test series. If Smith and Warner were playing, it'd probably be 4-0, and it would be very one-sided, I'd think. And that's the difference. You know, when we went to Pakistan, we went to UAE against Pakistan. Sorry, we don't actually go to Pakistan at the moment. I think we should, but anyway, we're not. When we went to UAE, we lost last time 2-0 by huge margins. This time we lost 1-0. We managed to draw, even though we were badly beaten. And I think that even with Smith and Warner there, we would have lost those two tests. Or somehow we drew one. I was shocked at that. So I don't think that series matters as far as those two being in there. I think that the Indian series will matter, and I think it'll be problematic for how we're viewed and how we view ourselves. If we manage to win the Test series, and I think we will, but if we win it, say 2-1, one example. Let's say that we lose in Adelaide, win in Perth, win in Melbourne, and Sydney ends up as a draw. That could be a 2-1 win. We could feel really good about that, considering that we don't have Smith and Warner, who were the best two players the last time we played against India. Or best two on our team at least. Smith I think he scored five centuries in 4 matches. It was incredible the way he did, and he's in amazing form. Virat Kohli has done really well too. Yeah, and it's bragging rights, and like it's not. We can say, oh well, we're missing out two best batsmen, 2 of our best players. That's our excuse. It'd be nice if we didn't have that excuse. If we could just go out there with our best team. And I'm hoping that certainly once the bans expire, that the Australian public and the international public are able to say, hey, they were both doing what they thought was right. And Bancroft was too. I think that we can say fairly clearly he believed that what he was doing was the right thing to do. And I don't think it's fair to call either Smith or Warner cheaters. And I think it is fair to call Bancroft a cheater. But I think we've got to have a bit of understanding for that situation. And we've got to say, hey, our media hasn't been exactly accurate or fair or balanced in how it's been reported. We've been sensationalising things, and we haven't been looking at facts in their proper context. So I think that it's really important that we start pushing the truth out there, not the version we've been told to say, but the actual version. And that's what we should be saying. And we should be saying, hey, look, Smith had a bad press conference, said some things he shouldn't have said, and Warner said some things he shouldn't have said in the dressing room. Neither of them were actually involved in the ball tampering. And that's what we should say. And we should say, yep, Bancroft was involved. But he did it because he believed South Africa were cheating and that he was levelling the playing field and taking one for the team. Now, in saying that, look, I'm not saying that South Africa are evil, bad team, cheaters, anything like that, but they did some things in that test series that they shouldn't have done. We obviously did, certainly with the Bancroft thing. And look, we're not perfect, not saying that we're perfect, but I think we've got to put things into proper context. And we've got to say, hey, this is not, it's not a Hansi Cronje situation. This is not a, I was going to say it's not a Streisand situation. He was actually found guilty of match fixing, found not guilty, and he's still banned. I mean, however unfair it is on Smith and Warner, poor Streisand. I mean, what can you say about that? There's a lot of really bad things that happen, and perhaps this isn't the worst one, but it is one that I think it's really important, even if the administrators won't fix the situation, that we in the public need to be responsible, be fair, be balanced, and say these are two great cricketers there. Steve Smith has the highest rating, the second highest rating behind Donald Bradman of anyone in history, according to the ICC player ratings for tests. He's a very, very, very good player. He was number one on the test batting rankings for 3 years in a row. He was perhaps not Australia's best captain, but still a very good captain. David Warner was our best opener since Matthew Hagan, and he was our second best player. And they're two really good players that the world wants back, Australia wants back. And they made a small mistake. They said the wrong thing. They've been blamed for a lot of things they didn't do. That's it. Okay, so we've got to put things into context. All right, thank you.